In this lesson, we're going to look at the question, how can I find the cube and cube root of a number? So cubes is just like the shape when you think of a cube. You're like, oh, hey, I have a cube. Let me draw one for you. You have a cube, this three-dimensional shape that you've probably seen before, and you really need to think of, when you're thinking of cubes, think of volume. And maybe you've heard of cubic units. When you figure out volume, you have to take your length, width, and height and multiply them together. In a cube is when all of those are exactly the same. So you have cubic units. So you would have what's called a unit cube, where length equals 1, width equals 1, and height equals 1. To figure out volume, we multiply length times width times height, and if they're all 1, you get 1 cubic unit, or cubic unit, or you could write that as unit cubed with an exponent of 3. And this is where you get the term find the cube of a number. It is basically, for example, if you have the unit cube, it is 1 cubed to the third, which would equal 1 in this case, because 1 times 1 times 1 equals 1. Now, say you have a 2, say your length, width, and height in your cube are 2, well, then you simply do 2 cubed, which equals 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 equals 8. So it is 8 cubic units would be the volume of a cube that was 2 by 2 by 2. 3 cubed would equal 3 times 3, which equals 9, times 3 more, which equals 27. And that is how you find the cube of a number. You multiply it by itself 3 times, and it's called a cube because it is the way you found the volume of a cube. That would be of a cube that would have a side length of that number. Because remember, a cube, all the side lengths are going to be equal. Now, I call it cubic roots. I've seen it indicated as a cube root instead. But this is how you would find the cube roots, the roots. Your symbol is going to look almost identical to a square root, except you're going to see a little number here. This is called the index number, and it's placed above the radical. Again, you have your radical right here, to indicate that you're doing a cubed root, not a square root. What number times itself 3 times equals the number inside, or your radicand. So, for example, if my radicand was 8, well, I would just need to know or think what times itself 3 times would equal 8. 8's pretty low, so it has to be a low number. I know it's not 1 because 1 cubed is 1, so 2 times 2 times 2 equals 4, 8. 8 is actually, aside from 1, the lowest cube that's a whole number. So we would have 8 there. And you can go up, you could even go up and say like, 64. Oh, what could the cubed root of 64 be? This is just a matter of trial and error to figure it out. So we could say, we know that 3 times 3 times 3 equals 27. Okay, so let's try 5 cubed. That would equal 5 times 5 is 25. 25 times 5 would be 125. So that's too much. So it's probably 4 then. So this is probably going to equal 4 cubed. So if I did, let's just test that out to make sure. 4 times 4 times 4. This would be 16. And then 16 times 4. That would be 4 times 6 is 24. 4 times 1 is 4. Plus 2 is 6, 64. Okay. So it is 4. And that would be the answer, and that's really how you figure it out. You've got to kind of trial and error and guess and check and modify and revise your checks to see what your cubed root is. You could memorize them all, but that's pretty tricky and a lot of work. So just understand how they work, a number times itself 3 times is a cube. The cube root is just working backwards from that number to figure out what your factor is, because it's the same factor all 3 times. And that is how you determine cubes and cube roots.